There we are. We are live, and thank you for joining us here from the Microsoft MTC in Malvern, Pennsylvania. This is the Dev Talk Show, and I'm Chris Gomez here with Rich Ross. And we have Andy Schwamm behind the microphone, behind the camera tonight. I know he's back there. There he is. Congratulations. How's it feel? You like it?
This is great. I screwed it up already. I hit the wrong button when we were going live. But this is exciting. I mean, I like this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I studied TV production in college and stuff like that, so I feel like I'm the, you know,
makes you the most qualified out of any of us, right?
Except I don't know how to do it.
So now it's you. That's it. And so our new permanent producer. Now, we're all taking some turns doing different things, having a lot of fun. And thank you for joining us tonight, whether you're watching us live on Mixer, Twitch, or YouTube, or you're watching us in the future on our YouTube archive. And it is December 4th, 2019. We took some time off for Thanksgiving, and we took some time off for the Tech Bash conference in the Poconos, which was a lot of fun and a big success.
And some of those videos are starting to hit the Tech Bash YouTube channel. So
That's
the
right.
first one got released today, and a great panel discussion around diversity.
Yeah.
And so go check that out at youtube.com/techbash.
Yeah, definitely. The Tech Bash Dev Conference. Tech
Bash one.
No.
So in the
channel.
comments, so down below, we're gonna have to tell you where to check out Tech Bash. But videos are gonna roll out
pretty sure it's Tech Bash.
from the Tech Bash conference all year long, and we were happy to host that. That was a lot of fun.
That was a lot of fun. That was 3 days of great fun.
The equipment was up in the Poconos. Do you say up when it's north? I guess you do. And it was also higher elevation, right?
Mm-hmm. You guys did a great job. We really appreciate all the work you guys did to make that thing run smoothly, and you know, it's a big part of the event, and I think the people like it, speakers like it, the attendees like to be able to go back and watch some stuff afterwards they missed, and people who haven't attended get to watch some stuff that they missed, and you guys worked tirelessly. Is that the right word? Tirelessly to make that happen.
Sure.
I think
it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's a blast. I love doing it. So
cool. That we'll get into the middle of 2020, and we'll probably start talking about the next one. There's a lot of exciting news, things that we'll be streaming and talking about. But tonight, we are going to continue talking about Azure, different Azure services. I heard, you know how they said there's more GUIDs than atoms in the universe?
right.
I saw something today. Somebody tweeted a joke that said, hey, if every one of us takes an Azure product, there would be enough for everyone in the world. Because the great thing about the cloud and platform as a service is new product and services and features are coming out all the time.
Yeah.
But today, we have talked a lot about hosting middleware services, or how should you do some of your business to business work, and it's super popular to create web APIs, HTTP based APIs, but then figuring out how you're going to secure them, host them, load balance them, maybe gate them for requests so that somebody doesn't just hammer them.
Yeah.
Get them behind a domain name, put them behind a certificate, or even just little things like how do I version them?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of stuff to figure out instead of just writing. It's not just the code that you write in Visual Studio.
Yeah.
But I hear there is a great Azure product that says, we figured that hard stuff out.
We take care of that hard stuff for you. Yeah, so in Azure, we have something called API Management. And that's what we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about tonight. I think you mentioned a lot of the really great features around there, and I think we'll get to, if we're lucky, half of them.
Yeah.
Because it does take a good bit of time to walk through and pull some of those things together. But I think we can at least show what it's like to get started, what it's like to get your first API up there, and some of the cool things about getting some of the things that you can use to make putting your APIs in there a little easier than just by manually putting them in place. So.
Yeah. So I guess when you've coded up your API and you've tested it and it works on your machine, you haven't thought about the actual work of hosting an API, managing it, running it. So I'm excited about this one because to me, it's what I never think about. And unfortunately have tried to do myself. When I say myself, of course, I mean on a great team with people at a place with the IT folks. So really scale that out to involving a lot of people.
Yeah, and a team like that probably would if you're talking about API.
And then
for
realizing
your
that you don't
systems.
really have it all in
Yeah.
place. So I'm excited. This will be great.
Yeah, and I think we'll start, just to kind of get into it, we'll start with basically by going into Visual Studio and doing
Okay.
file new project, right?
All right.
So I'm going to go ahead and say I've got my list of projects here, and
So yeah,
So right now I'm seeing your browser with Mixer on there.
oh,
That's not me.
that's not.
Oh,
Yeah.
it got switched back to him. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
I'm on 6, I think.
Yeah, I was playing around. Okay, there we go. Good.
6, yep, that's preview. Spacebar.
There
Yeah,
we
I
go.
got that part now,
Awesome.
yeah.
Visual Studio looks good.
Yes, in the
that's
dark
okay.
mode.
Which I like dark mode, by the way. Even for streaming, I think it looks okay. Some people say it's hard to read. I don't think it is for
No, I don't
streaming.
think so either. I think it's a good. I think it works well. So APIs, you can create your API in whatever you want. So create it in whatever language, whatever platform, whatever framework it is that you want to use. So obviously, when you say API in Visual Studio, we get .NET. Web applications, we get .NET Core. We even get Blazor showing up on the API side of things. But
Okay. So even though we are in Visual Studio right now,
Mhm.
that literally has nothing to do with API management.
Nope.
It's that we need an API to get started.
Yeah, and maybe we should take a little step back and say,
Okay.
okay, you're going to create APIs for your application,
Yeah.
like you mentioned, right?
Mhm.
You're a developer, maybe, typically or maybe not typically, but you can have projects where your back-end team is the ones who are focusing on building out that API layer that talks to those back-end systems.
Okay.
You've got your front-end folks who are focused on, hey, we're going to use, whatever the latest framework is to do the really cool UI stuff, React, Vue, Angular, what have you.
Okay.
Blazor soon to be
Blazor, sure.
that component going forward.
Or even if you like server-side frameworks like MVC or maybe a PHP-based framework or Python like Django or something, none of that matters.
None of it matters.
Because you're going to call APIs.
Yes.
Okay.
So you're going to call into your APIs. Now, what API management gives you is essentially a facade layer over top of your APIs. So instead of knowing that maybe I've got APIs that do our ordering system, let's say, and I've got an API that's deployed into Azure App Services, and it's got an endpoint URL that's, my order management.azurewebsites.net, because that's how we, name them essentially. And then you have your slash whatever services that come off of that, right? You might have another one for your users or your products or all of these different endpoints. And you might have them deployed as different app services inside of Azure. As a developer, I can basically put those all under one developer and access them all via that API management endpoint. So I could say, my company services.azure-api.net.
Okay.
And all of those services, no matter where they live, whether it's in Azure, on premises, in other clouds, in other environments, I can basically put those under that umbrella and then have that one uniform way of calling them.
Oh, that's even more flexible than I realized there. So it's not that you've got to get the routing and everything doesn't have to go to one server. They could be, and you were just saying on-prem, maybe this one's in Azure App Services and another one's in, what if it's in a container?
Sure.
That's okay too.
Sitting in Kubernetes.
Maybe using Azure Kubernetes or who knows whose Kubernetes? It could be yours or another friendly cloud.
Yep. So that's what we'll be able to see here. So as we create this API here and create essentially a website that is this API, we can deploy that into Azure.
Okay.
And then we can basically bring that into API management and show how that can be surfaced up through there.
Cool.
Sound good?
Yeah. That's going to be great.
All right, so we're going to go ahead. We're going to create our .NET Core application. We're going to say next. I'm just going to go ahead and say, I know I got to place this somewhere. So dev, stream, web app. We're going to call this, we'll make it simple. We'll call this my API stream. And we're just going to go ahead and create this. And then we get to, since we're talking about ASP.NET Core, we've got that decision to make of what kind of a core web application we're creating, whether it's empty, an API, a web app, or a web app that uses MVC. Lots of different options here. We're going to stick with this API one and this template.
Yeah.
Our APIs happen.
that'll just get us API ready controllers.
Yep, exactly.
Where the great thing about ASP.NET Core is you can mix all that stuff, and it's much easier than it ever used to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, this will get us a template that's pretty much ready to go. So that's great. That's
cool. So we'll do create. Excellent. And great, there are updates. Nope, not now, thank you. Okay, nope, we'll pass on this till later. And you can see we've got a very simple API here. This out-of-the-box API is going to give us one controller, and it's the weather forecast controller. It basically does a bit of, when it has a simple method of a get, and it does some randomization around the type of weather, the temperature. This is just a basic API. Now, you can build your own API to go on top of that.
Yeah. So if you're not familiar with ASP.NET or ASP.NET Core, we've got an API here that when you do a GET request to weather forecast.
Yep, exactly.
You're going to
part of the controller.
Yeah, and ASP.NET Core people, I know, you're looking at this saying like, okay, I see what's going on, and then all you're going to get back is just one of those freezing, chilly, cool, and a random temperature comes back, and you get JSON like normal.
Yep.
It's just for us C# and .NET developers, especially if you've been at it since ASP.NET, that looks super familiar.
Yes.
But if you're new to this, then you might say like, what does this have to do with what I might use Postman to call into? We could do that.
We could, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we're going to get a collection of these weather forecast events.
And then what's awesome in the .NET world is that gets JSONized for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, pretty nice.
We don't have to say, do the JSON.convert, serialize my class essentially into this that stream. It happens for you automatically.
Nice.
We'll go back.
Expression body member there too. I love it. That's another show.
Tools.
That's
Yes.
another show on C#.
So just all right. Let's see. So is that this part here you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean that's a method, except that it's called an expression body member, where you get a very arrow function like syntax. I like those expressions myself.
Very nice. Yeah.
That's
very
a whole
sweet.
controversial show there, though.
Not the sidetrack. Okay, so this application, if we were to go ahead and do, well, we should get our NuGet packages. If we do a build, we'll get those. So let's just do our, we did build, there we go. Going to download everything it needs, build succeeded. If we run it, we can see our, even the browser is black.
Yeah, you went. I mean, dark mode, beginning to end.
Yes.
Skype has dark mode now too, right? Or does Teams? Does Teams?
Teams does. Yep.
Cool.
Teams has dark mode. So this is what you get back. This is your payload. You can see we've got our object here with the date, the temperature in Fahrenheit, and then a summary, and then a collection of all of those. So very simple API.
Okay. Good. Yeah.
One thing we don't have inside of there, and we don't get it right now as part of the framework is, or as part of the project that comes in, is we don't get a Swagger and Swashbuckle included inside of there.
Okay.
So this is one of those things we've got to install. So we're going to install package. Yeah.
So we just did a regular API project. We've got an API. It works. We can call into it. So what does Swagger do for us in this particular case?
Yep. So what Swagger is going to do is make it provide essentially the contract between whoever's calling your API and what you're going to be providing back.
Okay.
So I can take a look at that, ultimately that Swagger documentation, and understand I've got to pass you parameters, or it's parameterless. I don't have to pass you any. I know what methods I have to call in as, whether they're gets, puts, or posts, or deletes. And then from that, I'm also going to know what you're going to send me back.
Right.
In an object manner.
Right. So, okay. So while Rich is working on that, getting Swagger in there, which is also, I believe, Swagger that's the same spec as OpenAPI.
Yes.
That there's kind of I don't want to call it a renaming, but the OpenAPI spec is out there, which intends to try and take web-based APIs, HTTP APIs, and give them the definition that isn't required, right? Some people might even complain that web APIs are a little wild, wild west in that way. And if you saw our gRPC show a little while back, Andy and I worked through a gRPC service where service definitions are first class. And if you maybe came from WCF, service definitions are first class. So Swagger is giving us that. Swashbuckle is specific to .NET though, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's where we're downloading that specific package into this.
So Swagger is the open source term. That's not specific to .NET. It just provides a spec over top of a web-based API.
Yep.
Swashbuckle says, I'm implementing Swagger for .NET and .NET Core.
Yep. And there is documentation out there because
right off of docs too. Yep. Great.
So inside of ASP.NET Core, just did a quick search for this. There's the whole Swagger Open API information. As we roll down through this, let's see, get started with Swashbuckle. And this will talk about, so this is steps we've done already. So we've installed the package. It's just, I always forget this part of the method that we need to make sure we capture. So if I copy this, should just be let's just go.
Yeah, we just had Chops to You join and follow the channel. So thanks for joining and following us.
Thank you, Chops. Configure services, right? This one here. Flow the controller.
The host notifications.
Oh, because we didn't do the.
Okay, so right now we had an API.
Yep.
We've added those packages, and you can sort of see that name transition happening because did you add the Open API models?
Yeah. They should have come in on.
No, I see them. They're currently not being used, but you're right that they did get added. So there's some of that Swagger / Open API naming. They're the same thing. I think I'm right in saying that they're the same thing.
Right.
Swagger was the former name, and people still call it that. In fact, the extension method still says it.
Still says it in there, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Not letting us add our service into there. We did get the package installed.
Yeah, boy, that package manager console is nice and tiny.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's bad on the. There we go. How about that?
Oh, nice. You know, I love it. Did you just scroll into that?
I did.
Now, has that been in Visual Studio for a long time? That's really cool.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, I don't know for sure. I've been scrolling, control scrolling the code for a while, but it also increased the size of the font in the console. The way I used to deal with that is there's in the environment, not that you should change it, but in the environment settings for Visual Studio, there's this place where you can change all these fonts. And I had like this presentation mapping where I would even the menus and Solution Explorer was just a little bit bigger, because on some of these high resolution monitors, when you're presenting to people and you try to tell them like, hey, so you see this file here, and the audience says no. So but it's great when you're working at your desk and you have that screen real estate is being preserved with those smaller fonts. And then you get up to present and it's like, wow, nobody can see what I'm doing. So yeah, Swashbuckle came in.
Yeah. Got that. It's not giving me the.
And you're looking for a certain extension method?
Yeah, add Swagger gen.
Let's see. Here's where what we'll do is we'll start double teaming this here. Get started with Swashbuckle and ASP.NET Core. That's what you looked at, right?
Yep. We did the release candidate package for 5, RC4.
Okay.
Then we came down and did the add and configure the middleware, which is the using statement around that. Then we're in this part here. We don't have to worry about the database context because we're not doing anything with that, looking from some other kind of database. We just need to add that method into the configure services.
What I think is interesting is that, they asked us to add the using statement, but it hasn't lit up yet in
here.
Yeah, so it's almost as if it's still wondering what to do with it. So in configure services, you're saying services.add swagger gen and not seeing it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, those are all the ads that I get, basically.
Okay. And on the project, you do see...
If I look at the references, right?
Right.
Dependencies.
ASP.NET Swashbuckle, ASP.NET Core is in there. Now, did you want Swashbuckle ASP.NET Core.swagger or just Swashbuckle.ASP.NET Core?
Oh, snap. There you go. There's the issue. I took what was in the, so it basically took, it's probably going to get downloaded anyway.
Yes, I think so. But I think what probably is that Swashbuckle ASP.NET Core has the definitions for the extension methods, but then the .swagger is what specifies it. So it's like Swashbuckle is setting itself up where it could support multiple standards.
Yeah.
I mean, we're guessing here. I don't work on Swashbuckle, but it's a great open source tool. And this is part of development. So the great thing is and how often does the extra set of eyes thing work, right, Andy? Like, you stare at something for 10 minutes, 10 hours, I dare say. And so I will tell you, when you're, if this is something you do as a career or even working on your own, and you beat your head against the wall for a few minutes, I think what I learned over time is don't be afraid to get up and ask for somebody's help, because just that extra set of eyes, they come over and they say, oh, look, I looked at it and I was going methodically and I went, oh, it's not .swagger. But if you looked at it 10 times, you would keep seeing
it.
Yeah.
You know what else I find happens is, how many times have you said, let's say you're stuck on something, and you say, hey, Rich, or someone, whoever's sitting next to you, you take a look at this for me, and Rich says, all right, walk me through it.
Yes.
And as you're explaining it to him, you go, there it is.
Right.
Because you're sort of like, you're changing your perspective to explain it.
Yep.
And sometimes you find it yourself. Just the act of like engaging with someone different changes your perspective.
Yep,
but
it works.
you know what happens is, if you don't reach out to people, that's where like imposter syndrome creeps in, and you just think like, oh, I'm no good at this. I must be the only one in the world. And look, we're doing a show like this live where problems come up. This is the real world.
And if you're new to development or new to a team or new to a company, you might be a little embarrassed, like, oh gosh, they hired me, I should be a great developer. And I think we all have to get over it and just say like, no, it's okay. And there's nothing to be embarrassed about. Your brain was filling in swashbuckle.ASP.NET Core.swagger. I don't care how many times Rich kept looking at it. Your brain would have kept filling it in.
You see what you want to see.
Exactly what I did.
Right. You see what you want to see. Like your brain, overcompensates a lot of times for things like that and tricks you and can mess around. But good eye on you for spotting that.
Yeah, I figured if I walk through the docs, we have to see it. And so now you've added in. We had to register the Swagger service, and so what's cool about that is that's generating the open API info, right?
Yes. So that's going to basically say, hey, we've got version 1 of our API here using the open API object, and then now that we've got configured the service, we're going to now that we've set up our service in configure services, we're actually going to go ahead and do the configure part of that. So basically, say I have the app. Use Swagger, and then we're going to define the Swagger UI component, and I'm just going to copy this so I don't have to sit here and watch me type the whole time. Interesting. Nope.
Chris, did you just put that in the comments?
Yeah.
Because it freaked me out. I'm like, wait, who's
figure I might as well
commenting as the Dev Talk
might
Show?
as well put in there what we used, right?
Yeah. I should log in as the Dev Talk Show, so instead of Shwami, but I guess it's okay, right?
Either way is okay.
I don't know if we can both do that.
In hindsight, we probably should have had an API brought into this, because that's not, we don't want to see the people coding the API part, right? Kind of, although it's important to see what you need to do to get all the bells and whistles to light up inside of the APIM, right?
Yeah, so I guess while you're doing that, and I know this is tough, right? Because now I'm asking you to pay attention to the docs and code and answer questions. But is Swagger a key part of making this work with? Okay,
You don't even need to have it.
It might help us though.
It will help.
Okay,
so,
great.
We'll talk through the couple of differences when we go ahead and bring this in.
Yeah,
so.
we'll
I gotta say, I'm glad you asked that, because I was sitting here thinking that I was worried about the controls a little bit earlier, and I might have tuned out. I thought, did I miss something? Is Swagger like the critical piece? So you're putting Swagger because are you considering that as sort of best practice for building an API?
It's certainly the best practice for consuming one.
For consuming,
makes it
right? So
easier
building
because
one
with
well,
that contract. Now other people can use their Swagger clients,
Mhm.
generators.
Yep.
And you could, I'm a Python person, say I could use my Swagger client generator or Open API, whatever the name is, and generate a Python client and say, awesome, I don't have to write any of the code to make get and post and put and whatever.
Yep.
Just works. Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting that you can just do that, you know.
Part of me was wondering is if API management is going to take advantage of the definition in any way and say like, well, the fact that you have that definition helps me help you.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
If that's not the case, that's fine.
Nope, that's absolutely the case.
Okay.
So while we
So it will help.
It will help.
Okay.
So that initial method that we had in there, the weather forecast method.
Yeah, which you have up on your screen right now.
Yep.
Right? Your weather forecast is up.
Yes. So when we just had that endpoint that we talked into, I could certainly bring that into API management and manually configure all of those. Whereas Swagger is going to basically say, I'm going to point to that and say, well, this is what my definition is.
Okay.
And if you just have one method call like we have here, all right, probably no big deal. But typically that's not the case. You've got a collection of things, and they have different, HTTP, methods on them.
Right. So once the Swagger generation is correctly in your API, then you get this page, which we'll get up on the screen in a second here. And how did you get to that?
So
you ran your app.
Just ran my app, and then /Swagger.
Okay.
And then it automatically threw it into, map me to.
All right. So it added that routing for you.
Yep.
And now
if I was to go ahead, now right now you see the weather forecast, right? But let's do, what's cool about this then is if I do.
That's the use Swagger UI, right?
Yes.
So you don't have to publish that. And you might even only publish it in dev, maybe. Anyways, the point is I noticed two different app.use things. One of them turned Swagger on. The other one turned on that great looking UI that lets you, as you work, you see that you're accomplishing what you want.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, this is great.
Let's try and do this just to show. Let's do that in the core code. There we go, controller class. And we're going to call this our products controller. Let's do cities, right? Because we're talking about weather. I've got this other controller inside of here. Make sure. Base.
Should I ask why you're switching them to controller base?
I'm just taking the same format that we've got here.
Okay.
Probably can grab those. Probably don't need to roll through and do all this. I guess the point of this was to say, well, if we add another controller, it will then show up in our Swagger definition and be able to be consumed later on, right?
All right.
So that's kind of that was why we were heading down that path. I was kind of just changing direction on the fly.
Good.
So we'll close that. We've got essentially our, we've got our project here. we need to get this somewhere where we can essentially run this.
Yeah, right now it works on your machine.
Love that.
That's it.
So
So we got to do something.
yeah. Now,
Ship it.
Yeah, it's
Exactly,
ready to
right?
go.
It
Ship it,
works.
squirrel.
don't recommend this, but for a demo like this,
Yes.
it works fine.
And we've talked about that on the show before. Is that there's a
Are
lot
you
of
gonna write?
disdain for
I
right-click
don't-
publish.
I
There's a
know.
lot of disdain
You feel
for
funny
it.
about that, don't you?
You know, I did it once today as well because I was testing something. It was just a prototypey thing,
Right.
and it certainly does make life easy. You can't always go and build out a full DevOps pipeline or something. I mean, if you're really building a product, you should. And you should do it on day one.
Yes.
But the purpose of this isn't to spend time on that stuff.
Yep.
So.
Nope. Yeah, that's another show.
No, I certainly said, I just want to see this on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And it is super quick to say, okay, spin up an app service in the free tier, and it is on the internet. Like real, for real, for real. The other place that I like for that is GitHub Pages.
Sure.
If it's not going to be something, if it's just going to be static. And I like, because it's like, it's for real, for real, for real on the internet. And I could try something against it now.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really played a lot with GitHub Pages, but the thing I was going to add is, right click, publish. Like you said, it spins up an app service on the free tier. And I'm still in the background complaining like 30 seconds. Come on, do I have 30 seconds? Meanwhile, it's generating like a server and a web app. It's doing a lot. And I'm like, 30 seconds.
It's not the days of go fill out a web server request form.
No, how about, wait, you forgot about like buy a server.
Yeah.
Like, right? And set up a server.
Yeah, right.
And, or beg someone to let you use their server.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's gone.
Yeah,
Like, it's
and
so easy now.
Go update DNS and set the host
Right.
bindings.
Oh God, how many things you got to do? And then of course you got to worry about security and all that other stuff. Is it going to get hacked?
Right.
At least if it's in
Put
Azure.
it on your web server, and then it probably doesn't work, and you're like, I used to do that stuff all the time.
Sure.
So like, I just want to see this work. Well, it'll be a while. In the meantime, we're sitting here and it's getting spun up.
Yep. We're waiting for the connections to all align. Actually, come off my screen for a second. I want to make sure it looks like it might be an account thing.
Okay, I'll talk. So, hey, so while we're here, while we have this break, if you're watching this on YouTube, what do you need to do, Chris? What should they do?
I think if you're watching on YouTube and you like what we're doing here, then go hit the little thumbs up. That's the like button.
Yep.
And then if you have a question for us or a comment about what we're doing, make sure you go down below and type that in. We try to read all the comments and either talk about them on a future show or gives us ideas about what to talk about next. And so that you know that we're either on the air or publishing a new video, then you hit the subscribe bell or the red button. Depends on phones, I think it's a bell, but on desktop, I think there's a red subscribe button.
Yeah, and if you're watching this on the stream, of course, subscribe to our channel.
Yep.
And
follow on Twitch or Mixer.
Yeah.
And if you have any questions, you ask in the chat. You show up to us live Wednesday nights, 8:30 p.m. in the U.S. Eastern Time Zone, and we will be here. And we would love to hear from you, or even learn from you.
Right. If we're doing something wrong and you see it, heck,
Amen.
jump right in and straighten us out because we don't know everything. We're figuring it out as we go. And a little communication back and forth is always fun. We've had some shows where we've had some nice interaction with people.
Yep.
And I enjoy that myself. So you ready for me to switch back? No.
Maybe.
So what else is going on?
Well, the toughest thing about Azure, right, is that it's Visual Studio. You can usually demo and not worry about just about anything that's on screen.
Right.
But unfortunately, your Azure subscription, there might be an email address or maybe some other sensitive.
Even with Azure Mask, which we've talked about a lot, that we use Azure Mask.
Yeah.
Even with that, your email address does show up if you click on the if you right click or whatever it is, or if you click on your profile, whatever, it will show your email address. And it depends. I don't often mind sharing my email address, except the email address I use for the subscription isn't always the same email address that I would share. So you have to watch out for all this stuff. I've heard stories where people say they on a stream they by mistake put the wrong screen up, then they got to go and change all those secrets or whatever, because it's like it's out there forever, you know.
Right.
You ready?
We're gonna do it on stream. You know, put it in a resource group, and when the stream ends, then delete the
resource group. Right.
Get rid of it.
So,
Are we clear for me to?
No.
Okay.
So, I don't know what it is. Last time I did something live on the stream like this, it just took forever.
It always does when you don't. At home, I mean, you know, like it works quick.
Oh yeah, in the office, no problem.
Yeah. And as soon as you're trying to stream or show somebody, I mean, I work on stuff all day, right? And as soon as I'll get on like a Teams screen share with somebody. Let me show you how to do this, and immediately it's like slow. Everything is slow. And you promoting Lafayette College there, by the way? You trying to move that in?
Goes, yes.
That's where the money goes, right? Yeah. How's you guys? How was your Thanksgiving, guys?
Thanksgiving was good.
Yeah.
Family was in town for us, and a lot of relaxing, and really not. Usually, there's a lot of times where Thanksgiving is a hockey weekend for us, and it was not this year.
Oh,
Really?
wow.
Yeah,
That's odd.
You didn't have to get up at like 4 a.m. or...
it wasn't this year. Yeah.
I washed my car this weekend, which was kind of like, because I had to go find one of those car washes where they're like, you know, indoor, one of those spray wash ones. So I'm like running around like an idiot, like spraying it, watching the timer go down. But I was really happy to wash my car because it's like this time of year, I don't get to do it too often. That was part of my big weekend, you know, washing the car. And then something else I was going to say that I did this weekend, and it's all like a blur. It's funny how like Monday morning, I'm back at work, and somebody goes, "How was your Thanksgiving?" And I thought to myself, my Thanksgiving, boy, that was like, it felt like it was
Yes.
already like, I'm like, oh, was it? You know, you forgot that like Thanksgiving just comes and goes. 4-day weekend it was nice to have a 4-day weekend.
Yeah, I think on Saturday I made the comment somewhere that, well, Thanksgiving was only 2 days ago, but it seems like it was a lifetime ago.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
we had a long weekend at home as well, so it was good. You know, tonight at the Philly.net user group, we talked about SignalR and gRPC, and we did gRPC on the show.
Yeah.
But I don't know that we've done SignalR.
We have not done
Yeah.
SignalR because I haven't played with SignalR in quite a while myself, so I know that we haven't done it on this show. The gRPC stuff is really interesting. I learned a lot from that show. I think we all did.
Yeah.
It's really interesting stuff.
Yeah, we just put together, and it's a little bit of a contrast to what we're doing tonight, because this is taking a web API and putting it behind API management, which I guess it's fair to say fronts your API.
Yep, absolutely.
So, does it just front web APIs? Could it? Are there other types of services it can front, or is it just HTTP based?
Like if it was a WCF service or something like that, like which is kind of old, but still, you know.
So that's one of the cool things is that you can use that as a broker between different communication types. So you might have WCF, you might have SOAP, you might have other legacy kind of applications that communicate via different protocols, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Via different protocols. What API management does gives you a layer essentially to translate that. So my endpoints from my consumers can talk REST, even though the backend service we created is
that's really interesting.
Okay, so
we have some legacy services. I don't know if you know, I'm thinking about use cases. We have some legacy WCF services, which still work fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, often you hear people say, well, like, oh, and it really not worth converting. Like, there's nothing wrong with using WCF, right? I don't think, right? But the point is, if a customer says, well, but we're using REST, and that's what, you know, they want to call it from some platform that, you know, it's easier to make a REST call, that's pretty nice that we can maybe stand up API management right in the front and kind of convert that over. That's a neat
Does it go the other direction?
It does go the other direction.
So I wanted to make a SOAP call.
Oh, wait a second, really?
Legacy application that knows SOAP.
That knows SOAP.
So
no SOAP radio.
I mean, we
guys
just
don't know
keep
what that
going,
means.
right? Like, what if it's a Swagger API? Can I then hit it with WSDL? Can I say, hey, let me get the WSDL for it?
Yeah. So
now there's a show there, right? Just interoperability of API management to import SOAP and REST APIs. And I'm going to guess it's not just SOAP and REST APIs. Although, yeah, Rich is trying to fix it over here.
And I'm wondering does it do other things like
so I'm looking at
is it load balancer or is it any of those things or is that handled separately?
No, there's a load balancer that gets created when API management gets created. And that's
if we could get to this sounds like a really great
So check this out here. Well,
can I switch to your screen?
Yeah.
It looks like among other things,
Hang on, let me.
and you'll see that I'm on Docs.
He's got the white web page.
Am I hitting the wrong thing? Oh wait.
He's on 5. IN 5.
Yeah. Oh, IN 5. Okay. Wait. Am I hitting the wrong?
There you go.
Okay.
Is that instead of just importing an API, I could just import the specification, right? From Open API, so that's Swagger.
That's what we're doing. Yep.
Or let's bring in a SOAP API. Or look at this one. This is what we talked about. Let's bring in a SOAP API and convert it to REST. Or what are these about? Import a function app. So if I have an Azure function, I could put it behind Azure API and it looks like it's part of something I built in Visual Studio with the API template.
It's not, but what's cool about it is it looks like the rest of your services that you're making available to your internal customers or even your external customers.
So you're saying you can consolidate them so they appear to be one API.
Yeah.
When they might be legacy services, they might be running on different servers, and then wherever they are. Well, I guess they're all running in Azure. Well, do they have to be running in Azure? I don't think they do.
They don't have to be running in Azure. There are ways to access them from other locations.
So, but you can now build like a common place for all of your APIs and sort of consolidate them together, and that's really cool.
Right. So if you really took it as your abstraction for your API, now all of that work that we were used to doing in Visual Studio to set up the routing almost becomes kind of meaningless, because you could just say, hey, I'm going to write a lot of Azure functions, but then make it look like it's one API. I could throw a logic app in there because it's also in the docs and say, okay, I've got 3 Azure functions and 2 logic apps, but to the end user, it looks like I'm calling a unified REST API.
Yeah, unified API, right? That's the word.
So there's a lot of cool stuff in there.
Look
at that.
Yeah. So basically, many of the services that we have in Azure, you can put an API management layer on top of it and expose out your services to customers or employees.
All right, so
I think it went.
Cool.
All right. So all we did was we just did a quick publish, and
all right, thinking.
That's okay. It's not going to find that because it doesn't find there's nothing at the root.
All right. So, can we switch back now?
Right.
You think?
Maybe.
We're working on it.
Yeah.
So what we've done is we started off by creating an API using ASP.NET Core. It's no longer technically called ASP.NET Web API, but it sure feels like it. Some controllers with a weather forecast. And now it's published to Azure websites.
Yep.
Azure. So it's a web app.
It's a web app, essentially.
Yeah.
Yep. An app service in Azure.
Okay.
This is that same look we had with our Swagger definition. If I wanted to go ahead and look at the weather forecast, I can try it out and execute and see if there's my response that I get back. Okay?
Yeah. Now,
go ahead.
That's a long
URL.
That's a long URL. Because I was going to say, I guess we don't have to do it. I was going to say, look, Ma, it's a real URL because here in Postman, I'm hitting it. But that's all right. You've done that.
Yeah. You can get
we know we can reach it. It's real. If you were watching right now, you could hit that, and I'm sure later it'll be down.
Yep.
But for right now, this is what we needed. We needed a real API
so that we can pull it into our
that
service.
API management's gonna access. And so we're in the Azure portal.
So we're in the Azure portal just to show what this looks like. You would basically say create something new. We're gonna go API management. Take a few seconds to spin up. And here as we gives you some information about what it is you're trying to create. We're going to go ahead and create that. We give it, a unique name across the Azure-API.net namespace.
Okay.
The TDT.
So like a lot of services in the cloud, it's got to be unique.
Yep.
And we happen to hit one there pretty easily. Good.
Yeah. I'm just going to drop it in my API demo. I have a resource group where we're putting all these together. We'll leave it in the East US. Organization name while required. It's just to kind of classify, who it is that is it's the name of your organization. So if we send an email to you or we notify you about services and things that are happening in there, we'll use that name. We'll just go ahead and use that.
Okay. So it's important, but it can be what you could use it maybe to group things, but it's any string, any text.
Exactly, because it's going to get included in the notification part. Okay. And then you have to pick your pricing tier.
Right.
So pricing is specific, you can go out to the pricing calculator in Azure and see what that's going to cost you to ring up and run these services. If you're an enterprise customer, you might get a little bit of, you might have some different prices in there. Yeah. So mileage may vary on the cost, but service-wise, what's there is essentially the developer and the premium are basically the same. If there are services that require you to have a premium version of API management, you're going to have access to those for the most part in developer. It's just that you don't get an SLA related to them. Okay. Whereas in basic and standard, there are going to be different services that are available in each of those, and documentation can help bring those out as far as specific things you might be looking for.
So if I notice it says view full pricing details, that's something you're interested in, like clicking on there, because I'm kind of curious to see what the starting point. Yeah, here we go.
So these are things that are going to be included in each of those tiers, right? So you've got the developer tier, which no SLA, a little bit less in the caching of data and the power of the service that's being provided, and all of the features that you can connect into. So connecting into a virtual network, connecting into Azure AD for authentication purposes. All of those things you're going to get in the developer tier, a little less expensive, but you don't get an SLA around it. You couldn't really run your production environment on those kind of numbers, basically, is what it comes down to.
Right, but if you're playing around with this as a developer,
yes,
I would warn people, this is one of those good places where maybe, even if you're using ARM templates or something like that, as you get into this a little further, spin this thing up for $48 a month, tear it down when you're not using it. Because if you're trying to keep your credits, if you're using like 150 credits, or depending on what you have on your Azure subscription, this is one of those ones where you could start to burn through some of your dollars. It's not a totally cheap thing, but if it's something that it's important to your company, it's well worth the money, right? But it is one of those ones where you want to be careful when you're spinning that up on your own.
And when you think about things that you might be needing in your services, authentication is one of those, and you got to be at standard tier before you actually start getting your Azure AD integration and being able to have accounts be used into that, right?
That's interesting. So you've got to jump up to $700 basically a month.
You can use it in developer though.
You can use it in developer, but then think about when you want to roll it.
Yes, okay.
And then same thing when you think about services. So each of these tiers essentially adds on more services that you can take advantage of. The virtual network integration, that's a really cool story in that you can basically take your API management environment and bind it to a virtual network in your Azure subscription. That virtual network, if you have something that connects your on-premises world to Azure, like a site-to-site VPN or an express route, now you're essentially, if that virtual network is connected through that, you can basically have your API management talk to that extension of your network in that virtual network.
So let me just see if I understand. Which direction is that? So even if my API management has access to my on-premises network, it would seem that an app service that's running, let's say I have an app service that hosts, that is my API. Okay. And it's hosted in API, or not hosted, but sort of surrounded by API management. I don't know what the word is for that, but like it's surface through it, right? So are you saying that individual app service is then considered in the VNet? Because that's usually something you consider at the app service plan. Well, no, it's not at the app service. Is that at the app service plan?
So where I've done this is, think of, don't think app services yet. Think I've got a an IaaS environment, right? I've got virtual machines running applications that are legacy applications that I basically lifted and shifted up into Azure, right?
Okay.
But I want to be able to share those out through that API management layer to other applications, other parties, what have you. I could take that virtual network that I've created with those virtual machines, have an API management be connected to that virtual network, and then essentially route incoming traffic to that virtual machine that's running my IIS server, let's say. In this
Gotcha.
case, it's got my API that I want to connect to, and then use API management to talk to it and get that traffic brought back. You can define the network routing such that communication externally from API management only goes to the API management server and nothing else. The API managed, or the IIS server that you've got, and then VNet and nowhere else. And then you could have it so that IIS server has the ability to talk to backend SQL environments. So now we've got a way to connect the on-premises SQL world to some kind of an API that then gets exposed externally via API management. So
That's simple.
it's
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah, piece of cake. Okay.
So, as long as you have a virtual network in Azure, it's easy to make that connection. It's just a setting inside there. But that's one of those things when you look at what's available, that's something that's going to require that premium level SKU to do that. Or,
Right.
like we did in one of the other environments I have here, if we have some time, we're going to go ahead and select that. We're good. And we're going to go ahead and hit create. Now, it is going to take some time for that to happen because there's a number of different Azure services that are going to get created. We talked about load balancers. We talked about, we haven't talked about but things like DNS routing and things so that we're able to find where that endpoint resides in the environment. It's going to take a few minutes to run. You'll get an email notification saying, hey, your environment is up and ready. So it's that, it could be that much of a time commit. So that's why, in Julia Child style, we built one earlier and
Very slick.
Where did I put it? Let's see. Here we go. This one here. So this is our API that I've created earlier. There is an API, a couple of APIs that exist. If I go into the API management part, you can see that this is where we can define where those APIs live. So we've got some templates, much like you were looking at in the documentation, Chris, around bringing in ODI, a waddle, a WASDL, or WSDL. You can bring in a logic app, function app, or API app, essentially, from hosted in Azure service. What we're going to do is we're going to do this. I don't think I've tried this one. Let's see if we can make this work.
The waddle. Now, is that a WSDL representation of RESTful or an HTTP API? Or no? Because I can't say I'd heard of WADL. Certainly WSDL. The scars are real from having done WCF back in the day, right? Look, man, I did BB6 back in the day. Let's talk some scars, right? We can talk about basic A anytime. 10, print. Hello, go to 10.
You can write that in your sleep.
Right.
Well, it's only, I forgot the 20. So
20.
It didn't really work.
This is true.
I didn't get the, remember renum? I used to use that
Which one?
command. The command where basically after your line numbers got crazy because, we would say 10, 20, 30 so that we'd have room to insert code.
Oh, yeah, I remember that, yeah.
Renumber.
I remember leaving space, though. That's
why you did it.
That one brings me back, though, because, it's funny how, I hadn't thought about that. I thought about the way that code looked, but that whole leaving space thing.
Yeah, we didn't say 10, 20 because BASIC demanded it.
Right.
Line 10, line 20, we
You
said
had
it
to
because
skip it, because you might need 11
I
and
need
12.
an 11 and a 12, right? And then you could do renum.
Oh, that
and
is so
say,
great.
Get me my space back.
That is
And it would fix up your Go subs and everything.
So we need to have, what do they call it? Throwback Thursday or something like
There
that?
was only some way we could write basic A. Some people call it basic A, basic A. We could write it in some kind of VM, DOS VM. I'm sure it's all possible.
I'm sure it is.
Probably written in JavaScript.
So what we've done here is we basically pointed to, remember in our
that
Swagger
URL.
definition?
Okay.
Well, we got to point to the JSON file specifically because it wants that specification file. Now, if we had one that was exported from, an API that was already deployed or existed somewhere, we could basically select that file.
So it doesn't. If it's possible that the specification might not be live, maybe just because the person doesn't like leaving it live,
right?
Or it's just not live. I mean, so you can say, I got the file, it's right here.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. You can choose, you can basically give it a display name of what you want to call the set of APIs that you're bringing in, whether you're going to use HTTP or HTTPS or both.
Right, yeah.
And then this here is your API suffix. So this particular set of services that we're bringing in is we're going to reference them by base URL of our API management, which I previously created,
Yep.
slash PDTS, the Dev Talk Show,
Right.
and then whatever services exist inside of there.
So API MROS, that was the unique name for this API management instance that was spun up. Lives in Azure, but that's the fronting for the open API specification above. So somebody is going to go to API mros.azure.api.net/TDTS/weather.
Eventually weather forecast.
Eventually, yeah.
But at least for right now.
And eventually you would put DNS on it. You would have a nice domain name over the front of that, right?
Over this part?
Right?
You could put your own vanity URL over top of that.
Okay.
Absolutely. We're keeping it simple. So we're not going to worry about tags or products at this point. We'll talk about those in a second. You can include versioning if you want, and different ways of how you want to do the versioning, whether it's via the path. So saying /v1, v2. You could do it in a header, where you specify in a header variable, or specifying in a query string. So you've got the options depending on how your API is listening to those, or you want your APIs to listen to those.
Yeah, because that's a battle among developers.
Everybody has their own.
People have their preferences.
Yep.
Some folks. Troy Hunt has a blog post where he talked about how he implemented all three.
And he said, "I don't care how you give it me, just give it to me."
He said, "People like all three, so whatever you pass in, if you put it in the header, I'll read it. If you put it in the path, I'll read it. If you put it as the accept header, I'll figure it out."
There you go.
I guess that makes sense though. Like what what he did. Like why not do all of them, right?
That was.
I don't know why I'm looking up there. I don't have my glasses. I can't see anything.
Oh
anyway.
yeah.
Okay. So anyways.
Here's someone saying never heard of Renum.
Never heard of
Well Ocean. Never heard of Renum. They didn't live through the joy.
I'm going to go ahead and create this. We're going to turn the versioning off for now. So I'm just going to go ahead and create the save.
Hello, Well Ocean, by the way. Thanks for joining us.
Well Ocean.
Yep, thanks.
We were talking about the old days of BASIC, 10, print, double quotes, hello, end double quote, 20, go to 10. And not every BASIC, I believe, had it, but I know IBM did because I had an IBM PC. The crazy thing about those days is that you had to learn the different flavors for the TRS-80, for the VIC-20, for the C64, for the Apple II. TRS-80, you wanted to clear the screen, it was called Clear. DOS was CLS.
Yeah.
Boy, I still remember some of that stuff.
I know, crazy, right? So this is our API management layer, and you can see we have a number of APIs already included in here. This My API is the one that we just brought in through that Swagger definition file. It automatically gave us the operation, in this case our get call, because it knew about it. And if I go ahead and look at that, I can...
Thanks to the specification. It said you
Exactly.
obviously have a get call in your API at /weather forecast.
Yep, and it's got a bunch of different definitions inside of there that we can look at and use. All of that came over from importing that Swagger definition. If I look at the settings, these are the things that I just included a little bit ago when I was wiring up that URL essentially.
Hey, Rich.
Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier, so that's really cool, right? You get all that stuff from Swagger. Now, if you hadn't used Swagger, you would just configure this stuff manually?
Yeah, so this one here was one I did manually. I just basically would go to this Add API step. Brings me up to, I would do a blank API, and I would just go ahead and say, what do I want to display it? Where does that web service live? So essentially going back to that Azure website's location. And then what's the API URL that I want to use? So I think in that one it was just, I think it might have been weather. But we can go and see, because I can click into here. I can look into the settings that were here. You can see that that's the URL that this particular web service lives. And then we're just using the suffix of weather on that. So that would be a little bit redundant. It'd be weather/weather forecast.
Right.
Right. What we're going to do is we're going to go back to this one.
Yeah, thanks. That's cool.
Yeah, it's flexible, right? So it depends what you're coming in with. So you don't have to go back and retrofit all of your APIs with a Swagger definition just to get them in here.
Yeah, right. If you have a working API, you can bring it in here and surface it, and then even brand it and gather together the methods in a way that it looks like it's a unified API. People say, "Wow, they must have worked really hard on that."
Mm-hmm. And
500 internal server error, so it's working.
Nice.
It's working as we expect.
yeah. So that's the request URL. That's gonna, because it doesn't have that definition in there. Okay, interesting. Why would that be?
That's you trying it out for the first time. Is that what that was?
Yeah. So there's no interesting. There's no web service URL listed there, even though we brought it in through the Swagger definition.
Okay.
Hmm.
Is it?
And this one's saying it's okay. It's getting responses. Go ahead.
So that front end panel is testing it. And like you said, it's saying 200 okay.
Yeah.
So it knows it was able to reach get weather forecast. But then when you tried testing it, was it in the test tab there?
Yeah, let me turn that off there. Okay. Yep. No parameters, no headers, that's fine. Hmm. My guess is this. So if you look at this one here in the settings, this one, here we've got the URL listed here under web service URL.
Right.
We don't see that on this one. It's odd.
You're used to seeing that when you import a Swagger definition.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, it didn't show up there.
Let's just do that. Essentially, it's all it's doing is pointing to wherever that API lives. Save that.
Oh, I see. So when you point it to a Swagger JSON, it says, well, I can see the host name for myself.
Mm-hmm. So it didn't put that.
Interesting. Because the design tab seemed happy about it.
Mm-hmm. And we told it where that JSON lived as a subsection of that file or of that API where it was. It just needed to get that address put in there. So we've got essentially a 200 with a response and sending back our information.
So if we were a web developer, or if we were just I guess it doesn't have to be a web developer, we make that call to that URL. I don't care if it's Postman, my own code, the new .NET tool.
Yep, and we could do it.
That's what we're
going to
see.
If you want.
It's a simpler API URL now, huh?
Yeah, exactly. We did turn off the subscription required, so this OCP APIM subscription key is a way of securing access to when you make those calls to make sure that somebody's calling you with the right token, essentially, when they make that connection. Not to go into where it is, but if you look at back here, the settings.
And we got, because we didn't need a certificate or anything because we're using the built-in Azure API.NET naming, and it's API mrros.azure.api.
Here, let me bring this over so you can see it. Settings. So it's apimrros.azure-api.net.
And then from there, I just need checking to see if it works in Postman. I'm probably not going to get anything. I got a 404, but I mean, at least that's something.
Yeah.
Because I actually got that back, right, with some JSON. It's not like I just, but it was weather forecast was our
/TVTS/weather.
Oh, that's right. So in your Azure API Management, the APIM R ROS, it can host more than one API because, like you said, you have the /TVTS. So you could have a home for all your APIs for your whole organization.
Yes.
Okay. And that's considered one API management instance.
It's considered one API management instance. Yep, absolutely.
So, because we were talking about pricing earlier, one instance could host multiple APIs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's pretty good. I mean, I could see.
If you have a small set of APIs, those numbers, there's a little sticker shock, right? But then now think about what if you have a lot of them?
Right.
Now the cost of you managing them on your own has got to be way more.
And not everybody has this capability, but think about you may have services and data that you get rid of that that you have in your environment that you may be able to put some kind of a monetary value against, and using this as a way of sharing that information or making that information accessible, and to put some kind of an economy around that, and be able to basically have developers come and say, or customers come and say, hey, we want to purchase that data. This gives you a way to start to make that happen, basically.
Right. So like on my screen, I called into this.
Okay.
And so that means it's live, it's real, it's at that address. We talked a little bit about how sure we could do a custom DNS name, and then if we wanted it to be HTTPS certificate and all that, but probably not worth it to look at here.
Yeah.
So no. I'm saying not to. I was talking about other stuff while you were getting this going.
Okay.
So yeah, I called into it, and there's the JSON with the temperatures and those summaries and everything. So, and it's random every time, right? I could call this again, and it's different. So, features on the API. And maybe I'll just pick one. I don't know if this is where you want to go next, or you didn't know how to do it. Because it sounds like there's a bunch of them. It sounds like there's a bunch of them. So here's something that I bet you as a developer, it would be really painful to say, okay, the boss comes and says, or the marketing, because you talked about monetization, and that's why this popped in my head.
Yeah.
So whoever it is says, you know what? You're right. We should monetize this. So you know what we got to do? We got to make sure people don't hammer this.
Yeah.
You know, they can only call it so many times a minute.
Yep.
So is it easy for you to say that from a particular a user like me, even though you don't have me as a user, from an IP, I can only call it once a minute?
Yes.
And we could implement that pretty quickly, because I'd love to hit it in Postman and then hit it again, and it says like, nope.
Yeah.
You've run out of requests.
So you can break that down more granularly.
Wow, even more than that.
Wow.
Okay.
You can. Let's just leave it at that. We can go down more granularly.
Okay.
Right now, what we're going to do is we're just going to put something in place called a policy that's going to prevent that from happening. Right.
Okay.
Well, those are typically things that are like, I think, I'm not a networking guy, right? But those are typically like firewall features, right?
It can be.
Well, right. But I'm saying, but they're built into this as well.
Yes.
So you don't need to like overlay another firewall or something like that.
Yeah, here's where firewall, because, and maybe you can help here, because I don't just want the request to be denied. You know, when you send your overage request to a Twitter, a Facebook API, you get back a request that says Twitter's famous for they use HTTP 420.
Yeah.
They're famous for that, but the one you're supposed to use, I think, is like 406. I could be wrong about that. I'm not looking it up right now.
406
for too many requests.
Like
maybe
sort of denied, but for a reason.
It may not be 406. I don't know what it is.
Only because I ran through it this morning. 429.
429. See, that's
ran into it this morning. There you go.
Yeah. So that's the one that you're supposed to use, right?
Yeah.
And Twitter became famous for the other one, but it doesn't matter. The point is that you want that response.
Yes.
So I as a developer can back off.
Yeah.
And what I'm not sure about the solution you proposed is, do I get that from the firewall? Or
I don't know. I don't know how. I wish I could add something to that. I just know that
there might be good hardware solutions that I just take care of it for you.
Right.
The key is I don't want to build that back off into my API.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, could you imagine being tasked to say like, okay, now go write some code? And I don't want to do that.
Right.
So here's a product that says,
Now write the code where? On the API side?
Or you don't have
client
API
side?
management. You don't have it.
Yeah.
Chris is, I think he's saying like you would have to write something that says, hey, this same person is pinging me over and over
That's
again.
insane.
Sort of like a denial of service kind of thing.
It's crazy.
Right? And I believe that firewall products like have that,
Sure,
right?
Sure.
And but I like the fact that this is like really feature rich, that I can get a lot of things.
But you as a
as API.
developer, just through, it just works. You're
Yeah.
not, no request to IT,
I don't have to make changes to my code.
no data center.
Yeah. That's it. Forget the data center.
You want to build this at home?
Let's go back to my screen.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
Is that his or yours? That's yours.
Chris's, yeah.
Okay,
Mine's
let's-
6.
So
You're going to set it up.
Yeah, so I'm going to set it up. I'm going to talk real quickly around this first. So the process that happens is that your front end Azure API Management endpoint is going to get hit. It is going to know, because we've set it up and configured it that way, where it needs to route that information to. And you think about, it's a loop, right? I'm routing it to the backend service. When I get done with the backend service, it's going to send it back out to the front end, the API management piece, which will send it back onto whatever client asked for it. Now, if you look at the screen here, we've got some options or some things that we can configure. You've got your front end service. You've got essentially this inbound processing. So as requests come into the environment, they get past that front end firewall and front end load balancer of API management. And before they go onto the back end process, we can put some policies in place in here to manage that traffic. Same thing on the outbound. Think of information that might come back in from the back end, like maybe your API. We used to do this with some of the MVC API calls where we would say, hey, give me a list of products that's in the server. And when you send that list of products back, we're also going to send you the URL that takes all the API to get right to that product, right? What happens when you do that is it's going to pass it in the URI or URL of the backend service. Then now all of a sudden your backend service becomes known to your clients who are calling your API management piece. This outbound processing gives us the ability to basically say, when you find that string of text, replace it with the API management endpoint, and I don't have to then expose
that is really cool. So what is it? It's just, I mean, I'm kind of guessing here. It's just sort of like looking for certain things. Like it's gonna is it like a regex, or is it like looking for, given this URL, replace it with that URL?
It's more string matching.
String match. That's
string,
right.
Replace it with this string.
But that's like one of those features that's like, without that, you do introduce that problem so often that you're returning the wrong URL and you want the API URL.
Yep.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And you might have had to write code to do it, and now it's saying, no, it's now business logic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That is really slick.
And we used to do certain things with, this is going back to early 2000s, but there was the firewall and security product that Microsoft used to have, and we would put it in place in our environment and then route our SharePoint traffic through it. And it would be that go-between. And we would have it do that so that the URLs were
right.
changed up as they went back out. So this basically gives that same capability, but in a much easier way. So we can basically add a policy, and we can do this one here about rate limit.
Look at that.
The right one.
This is just another, I just feel like I got to say this here, that this is, first of all, it's totally cool, right?
Yeah.
But it's just another one of these, and it's one of those like great things and terrible things about Azure at the same time. This is like, there's a lot to learn here. Like, wow, there's a lot of features. It's more than just like, oh, okay, we're going to wrap your APIs and put like a common URL to them or something like that. But like adding more and more features, this goes to show that like when you're going to embrace Azure, there's a lot of great stuff that you can get into. This is kind of like what I do, like at work. Is my job is to figure all these things out, and then like it's like you don't even know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And that's what's great about a show like this. Like I'm sitting here, and I'm just learning this. This is great. I'm learning it from you, and we have the benefit of having you in here. But there's just so much stuff that I don't know still. And I've been using Azure for a while now. I did not know this one yet,
And remind me of that because when we're done doing this, we'll show you some way that you can learn all about this.
All right.
And not just by watching us, even though we're happy to.
Yeah, this is a pretty good place to learn it. But
so you can number of calls. We're going to limit it to 3. So you'll hit it 3 times real quick. Renewal period on that we're going to set up 15 seconds. So it's not going to completely limit us from doing this. You can include counter key. So what am I counting against? So API subscription. We can set a subscription for you as a customer. To say if you come in here and hit against our API, you're only going to get so many calls in a certain amount of time because this is the tier you purchased, right?
Yeah,
we
right.
Do something like that. We can do by IP address or those custom ways of doing that, which I haven't played with, I'll be honest. And then any request. So that's our incrementing condition.
Does it need to be IP address for this, or
it doesn't?
Okay.
We're just basically saying anybody coming through.
Okay. That's the whole subscription.
Yep.
Is limited. So that's a way of saying this whole API is limited to 3 calls every 15 seconds.
Yep.
Okay.
So we're gonna save that.
Just on that operation, or you said it for all operations?
So
because that was highlighted.
So, and that's what you can. So those are some of the options. So I've got all operations here.
Yeah.
If I wanted to go into the weather forecast, I could add the policy specifically on that on that method as well.
All right.
But we put it at all operations just to make it easy to see and visualize.
All right. So
now,
is that active?
We did save it. Yep. So that would be active. There's also, while we did that through kind of like a wizardy way of doing it, it gives you essentially a XML based schema that you can modify and maintain yourself. So if I wanted to, I could say insert policy and go ahead and be able to let's say I wanted to put a course policy in here. I could do that. Whoops, not that.
So I'm sure that this could all be accessed through either the CLI, the Azure CLI, or the Azure API, REST API. So that, again, heading towards automation. In all these demos, we're always, we almost always you see people using the portal, which is fine to learn.
It's good to learn.
We've got to automate, which is something we haven't really tried to do here yet.
Yeah.
What about on ARM templates, by the way, as well? Do you know if these are accessible? Most things are, but not always.
So Portal, ARM template, and PowerShell.
And PowerShell.
Not a CLI integration yet for this.
Excellent.
There's also a management API here where you can manage the importing and the modification of the API. So as you go through your deployment pipeline for your API and you want to rev to the next version as you push this into API management, you can use the management APIs to make those kind of changes.
Wow, that's cool.
Right, so we've got that rate limit, and it's in effect.
It's in effect. So you should be able to drop into Postman if you want.
Yeah.
Let's bring Chris's screen up.
All right. So earlier, I was in Postman because I just wanted to see. Does it let me increase the view? Zoom in. Yeah, I can. Cool. I just wanted to see this URL work. I was super excited, and so I'm gonna send, and I got one, and then send. Oh, it's an internal server error. That's odd. I don't think that's what we wanted, right? We weren't getting that a second ago.
No. Is it same?
Did I mess up?
Change the URL or something?
.a? Oh, that's A.
All right.
Can you go back?
Let's go take a look.
Do you have app insights on these things? Like, how do you? So here's the question. So how do you debug? How do you deal with problems in API management? That's why Chris purposely did this, so we could get into a situation where we learn how to now deal with problems.
Yeah. So I haven't. If you want to give that another test, just to make sure. Well.
Okay.
So I haven't enabled.
All right. So there it is.
Now it works.
Okay,
So you
it
think
works.
it was the rate policy?
It was the
We
policy.
just didn't do it correct.
You had a broken policy.
I think that policy gave different variables than when I tested it earlier because I did run through it to make sure I knew what I was doing. I'll be honest. So if I do base, and I say, well, we can go from here, different way of doing.
Let me switch to your screen here. Sorry.
Okay. So instead of that GUI here, you can go in there and you still get some help.
Yes,
Okay.
you do. So enable renewable lifetime call volume or bandwidth quota. Let's try that. Well, not. All right, let's go. Come back. This. Go to policy.
Okay, so this gets you in the XAML, and then you can say insert policy, and it's almost like getting some help here.
Yeah, but that's almost like that.
You expected there to be
like when you do. All right, let's do this.
See, Jess joined us.
Hey, Jess.
He says the first step is admitting it, Andy. Now, unfortunately, I'm just seeing that now, and I'm not sure what was I saying that would have warranted that response. Probably a lot of things about me saying that I don't know what I'm doing, or
Well, thanks for joining us on Twitch.
There we go. That's what I was.
You know, Jess probably heard his ears ringing because earlier tonight in at Philly.net we did SignalR hands-on lab, and I showed the audience that there's an ASP.NET Core sample whiteboard that they use to demonstrate SignalR.
I know where you're going with this.
And the moment that I showed it to everybody, I specifically said, this one's for Jess Chadwick. This is the whiteboard sample, and you could draw little lines, and they showed up on the other screen. So he heard, and he said, "Why? What is driving me to go to Twitch tonight?"
Not superior content. That wasn't driving him.
I believe that's what that is. Let's see. Let's try it. What the heck? What could go
We're
wrong?
gonna try again.
Yeah.
All right.
So this time we did it 3 calls, period of 15 seconds, and context at subscription.id. I believe that's what it is.
Okay. So over on my screen, I'm back in Postman,
Back to Chris.
and we're gonna try this again. This was the previous. Oh, that was nice. Look at there's Andy in the middle of the screen.
No, how'd you do that?
That was pretty cool. Whatever you just did.
I was trying to do a nice fade between the two screens. So, because I've got a preview, you know, like in the top section, there's 2 bars. I assume it would work like the bottom section, like the A and
You
the
brought
B.
yourself up right in the middle, like you could.
Yeah, I didn't want to do that, but that's kind of cool. Let's do it. Look, here I am, like, whoa.
Coming in through the screen.
That's not what I wanted to do, though, but that is kind of cool. Like, I'm ghosting there. Like, all right, so I'm just going to, like, go back to...
Go to 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
No, go to 5.
All right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You're at 5.
So let's try hitting the API, and it's still not working.
Well, not working.
Still getting 500. So
Bear with me. Darn. Hang on.
I just made that part up. I said, let's challenge Rich, and then of course.
I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that we can do this. It's whether or not it works is always, you know, but we're demonstrating a feature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I saw in that list of things that you could do besides rate limiting, it looked like there were a lot of other options. And I really thought that whole idea of being able to modify the requests inbound and outbound, like what a great way to preserve your code. Like normally, if you could, you know, if it's something that just a little switch would solve the problem, here's a way to say, hey, we don't have to go rewrite the code. In fact, maybe we don't have the code.
Well,
Which,
yeah, right.
Which happens, right?
But in particular, when you talk about how we were saying maybe we could take an old service and expose it out through API management. So if that old service has that URL, that URL example is such a good one, and I guess there's other things we can do, but take that old service and just implement API over the top of it, and then we don't have to go in and change that code. Right. So you think about like different hats that people wear at the office, right? Somebody already wrote that service. It works. It's tested. We don't need to redeploy it. We don't need to think about it. But if I want to wrap it, I keep using the word wrap it in an API management, we can do that without touching that code. And that's pretty cool. So like maybe, you know, a different team is involved in like, you know, well, the performance isn't great or something. We want to do something different with this thing. Let's just go right to API management and wrap it and change the URLs that it throws out and stuff.
Yeah.
It's totally cool. So,
all right. Hang on. I know I did this.
I'm gonna put your screen up here so we can just watch you do this.
You watch me run through this.
Oh wait, this is the wrong one. I got Chris's screen up there again. All right. What are you looking at? The history of.
That's what. Okay. Yeah. So this is a good opportunity to talk about.
Oh, this is just your browser history, I think. Okay.
This is, yeah. So we go into document. This is overview, API management. We can see about API management. What's really cool is there's a section up here at the top about C training modules. That's where you can go ahead and learn Azure, learn at your own pace. And inside of here, if we just search for API, it talks about API across various services, but there are.
I saw that one. It's on the left called Publish and Manage Your APIs with API Management.
Yep.
Is that the one you were looking for?
It is not. There's another one.
It's like, come on. No, but that's a good start. It says beginner.
Yep.
So that's good for me.
Protection.
And then there's improve the performance of an API by adding. Wow, there's a lot on API management.
There is quite a bit.
That's pretty cool.
Improve the developer experience with an API with Swagger definition. Architect API integration in Azure.
And the great thing about these Learn modules is that when you start them, I'm correct about this, right? You start them, and even if you don't have an Azure subscription, it says, okay, we'll spin up a resource for you.
Yep.
So that you can work with it for a little bit.
Oh,
I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know about API. I'm just not sure.
Well, not being sure has never stopped you from saying it before.
Yeah, well, of course. I mentioned Renum earlier, but that's a thing, I promise you. That was the thing.
You can make it up.
But what it does give you is a step-by-step set of
Yeah,
procedures.
that's exactly what to do.
Create an API gateway, call an API with a subscription key, and as you go through it, it's gamified a little bit, right? You get points, so you can increase your levels and go up through that.
Yeah.
Well.
You mentioned this before, I believe. That I remember, as you said, the gamification of it. I remember you talking about this from previous shows, but I don't think we've ever gone into it and shown it like this. Maybe we have, but maybe I just wasn't paying attention. But this is cool.
Yeah,
I wonder what I'll do with the points.
Can you turn them in for swag and stuff like that?
Let's just do. So let's do this. One last try.
Okay.
I'm just going to not have any kind of counter around it. We just want to show that you can limit it, right?
Yeah, right.
It doesn't like, counter keys missed.
So a counter isn't something straightforward there.
Yeah.
It was pointing to a key. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And,
So internally, I guess that makes sense.
yeah, I thought that key was that you could define it by, here we go.
Yeah, it's state management, right? It needs to keep track of that key somewhere, right?
Yeah.
It's a I mean, to keep track of that counter.
That's what I had. Context subscription ID. Well, let's make it this way. Because you may or may not know what your subscription key is, but I certainly know you've got the same IP address base.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, last try.
All
Let's
right.
do it.
Well, if you think about it, if you did it by subscription, that would mean that anyone making a call would, I would think, would increase the counter. But if you're doing it by the IP address, it's
one.
right for so if lots of people are hitting it, it's only one person hitting it 3 times that would cause the trouble. I would think.
I would
You
agree.
said 3 calls every 15 seconds, right?
3 calls within 15
Okay,
seconds.
well, hang on. Should I switch
So
to
here
your?
we go.
Switch to Chris.
Hang on.
Here we
Let's.
go. This
Dun,
is
dun,
just
dun,
a
dun.
normal Postman.
Drum roll.
There's
For the money.
API. It's protected by API management. We didn't write any code, and we send. And there's 1, and there's 2, and there's 3, and then 429 rate limit is exceeded. Try again in 12 seconds.
Drop mic.
Azure's great. Azure API Management is cool. And that's just one thing we can
And that's
do.
just one thing. So a couple things we didn't talk about that are really interesting. Caching. So that request you made because it didn't change, maybe it doesn't change for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I can cache that in the API management environment. So it just goes to that. It never goes to the backend server again. It just picks it up there. Now there's limits to how much data you can store. That's all based on the tiering. But that gives you a way of getting a faster response back to your customer while saving your backend APIs that don't need to process that data that's not stale yet. You can also, what's the other one? Oh, You can obviously you can put authentication around this, so make sure that your clients who come in and talk to this environment are secure in talking to your APIs. There's a whole other section that we didn't get to around defining these as products. So you might have a product inside of all the various APIs that your company is putting out there. Different products, maybe one for this particular set of services, maybe some of our catalog services, some of our reporting services. Those are different products, and then you can make those products available to the developers who want to access them and include them in their application via a developer portal. So they can go there and they can see the definitions of how they would communicate with that API. Even if there's no Swagger definition underneath of it, they're still seeing the API information that got configured inside of API management. So there's a whole other layer of infrastructure we never even talked about with what we've got here. But
yeah,
there's a lot.
So from this chair, we didn't install any operating systems
No.
or configure any switches or nothing, and it's like
Just some XML.
API. We built
And JSON.
You created the API.
Yeah.
And then published that with our good friend right click publish. Friends don't let friends
No.
right
Sorry.
click publish for
All right.
production.
All my DevOps friends out
And
there.
then, and then put an API management in front of it and even rate limited it, which I love because like that's my favorite thing is to click. I'm sitting here clicking this going like, look at it, it's rate limited. That's so cool.
And
I'd like to play around with the caching and see how that stuff works. I do want to ask you one question. I know, probably wrapping up the show here a little bit. You mentioned about some security stuff, and I'm wondering if does it generate things like API keys, sort of like a function app does, where you have like those keys?
so
Is it similar to that? Like, will they generate like certain keys and?
yeah, so you can make sure that I turned that off here just to make it easy for Chris to access it.
Yeah.
But essentially, you can enable the key. They call it a subscription key.
Yeah.
And you can also include that as part of your developer contract, right? So we can create a product. We can share that out with developers and say, well, you guys have access to this particular product. And oh, by the way, here's your key access this environment, right? So they have that's where it is. It's in the
So
go ahead.
does API management manage, or you could use it to manage the distribution of keys?
Mm-hmm.
That's part of that product.
Yes.
Where the Azure AD integration, it is part of it, but it was different. There was some tiering to it.
Yes.
Okay. Right.
So it could be that. So you can essentially create a policy in there and have your API be registered, your backend service be registered against your Azure AD environment, have client applications also be registered against the Azure AD environment, and that client has access to the specific API scope that you've defined when you did the registration. So I can create a scope for that API, and then when someone goes and says, hey, I need to talk to that API, well, what's the scope of access you want inside of there?
Right, and that's generally, I'm sure this is painting with a broad brush, but that's generally used for internal applications where API keys are, I have an API that I want the world to use, but I don't know who you are, and I'm not going to figure out who you are. So register for an API key.
Yep.
And
do it that way. Yeah. And you can have your developer portal, when you say that go register for a key, your developer portal can be set up where you can invite people to it, or you can say, hey, this is our public set of services. You can register and try them for free.
Wow.
Maybe do approvals on top of that. So if somebody just comes and sign up, maybe for this tier, they can automatically get in to kick the tires. But if they want to go something a little deeper, they've got to get some kind of approval, essentially.
So there's a portal aspect of this as well.
There is.
Which is another thing. I mean, I don't think we showed that, right?
We did not, and that was a whole nother.
Remember what I said is like it's a blessing and a curse. Like there's so many features in here. Right? This is just amazing.
Yeah. So this is looking at our developer portal. Yeah, this is in dev mode essentially. So to be able to create and modify. And I always forget how to get out of this. Yeah, and it's just going to let me go ahead and click around those. Portal might be the old one. Yeah, that's the old version. But essentially, this is what, as a developer, I would come here and look at that. I can say I can sign up for the APIs, and then once I'm signed in, I can go ahead and start exploring them.
That's awesome.
And then if you want to, you can build out this page with additional information around all your services that you have. Basically own the content that sits inside of here. So this is yours to modify as you need to.
Yeah. I thought I turned it off. I thought I turned off my phone's sound. It was set to stun, but it didn't work. So, all right, Azure API Management.
Yeah.
Good start there. And we did it all, to be honest, we did it pretty quickly, even though it might not have seemed like it, because I just feel it takes me back to thinking about what it would have taken to set something like that up. But now with tools like the cloud, it's super easy. So I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, and I think if we didn't start by building the API, we probably could have just focused right on the management stuff and seen a little bit more. But I think one of the things that we want to try and do is take advantage of API management and start thinking about some of the things that we have that we do on a routine basis here for the Dev Talk Show, and how can we build out those services or build out those features and functions, and then maybe put API-M as a way of accessing and maybe sharing that information, putting our own economy around those.
Yeah, so first we learned how to use that product, but then we were talking in future shows, let's start applying our own work to it. And so to that end, don't forget to visit us at thedevtalkshow.com. And then if you want to see any replays, you can find us on YouTube at video.devtalkshow.com. Or just if you're on YouTube, you can search for the Dev Talk Show channel and you should find us. And don't forget to like and comment on this video if you got any questions, and then hit the subscribe button and you'll know when we're going to go back on the air, and just catch up on our old videos too. So next
if you
week,
see us around, you could ask for one of these new
if you see one of us in person, you can get a sticker for your device. There's one on your device right now.
I have one.
Those are
somewhere in there.
Those are premiering right now.
Yeah.
So that's the world premiere of the Dev Talk Show sticker.
Nancy, do this, which will lose your screen over there, but that's fine. We're done.
It's okay. Yeah.
And you can't zoom in here.
It didn't lose it. It's still on.
It might be frozen. It's still up there, but
Down there in the corner with all the various stickers.
Wow.
It's on there. So.
Even a sticker for Sticker Mule, right? Which is to make the stickers.
That's very meta.
It's very meta, yeah.
So even because we just received them today, even when they sent us a pack of stickers, they also sent us their stickers.
Oh, that's where you got that. Okay. That's cool.
So I figured, all right, it makes sense. Let's put it on there. Let's give them a plug. So Sticker Mule, check them for specials. That's how we got ours. So.
Cool.
Yeah, and don't forget, you can follow those learning paths that you showed right on. And that's part of Learn.
Yep.
Okay, which easy to search for. You say Learn API Management, and you're going to get to Azure Learn pretty quickly. I mean, that's what I did to get to that page.
And there's handy, especially if you look at the overview sections in the docs for the various things that we have in Azure. So in API Management, we're looking at the overview section. Right off of there is a link to that Learn content, and then just search for the technology you're looking for. And there's some great walkthroughs around all the various things. Not only in Azure, there's the DevOps section in there is outstanding. So that is definitely a set of tools to go take a look at, or a set of training to go take a look at.
All right. Well, I'm sure we'll be back to this and back to coding next week, Wednesday, 8:30 U.S. Eastern Time. Again, join us on Mixer or Twitch. Make sure to follow us there. You can ask us questions right in the chat. You can do that on YouTube as well. And if you're watching this sometime in the future and we're back in the past, then again, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. So I think we're good from here.
Yep.
So thank you, Andy, for producing from behind the camera. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And then thanks, Rich, for teaching us all about API management.
Thank you.
So
guys.
for Andy Schwamm and Rich Ross, I'm Chris Gomez, and we will see you next time on the Dev Talk Show.